room. So, all right, I will open up the room.
Are we recording, Aditi?
Yes, it is recording to YouTube. And I can. Yes. All right. Hello, folks. Welcome. So glad that you could join us today. Thank you for being here. And for those who have their cameras on so we can see your faces, I'll get us started right away. My name is Aditi Garg, and I'm at the University of Saskatchewan, which is on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. And at the University of Saskatchewan, we are called to Nakatai Tamuin, which is to protect river, land, and water by taking care of the relationships that we have with the land, water, and also with our students, colleagues, and neighbors. And we're guided to mindfulness, respect, and reverence. And to me, that protection of nature and land is so relevant to my role in sustainability in teaching and learning. How do we help students develop competencies for sustainability? I was lucky enough to meet my colleague, Emily Flies, through the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education from the University of Tasmania, which is on Lutruwita Aboriginal land. And so we both have these colonial settler histories and an institution with a care for helping folks work towards sustainability. And in that regard as well, we thought about the role of women and women in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine. And today is a very special day. Well, it's already March 9th. Tasmania is in the future, but it is International Women's Day, which is really a concept that's only over 100 years ago. So really one human lifetime experience. So thinking about how much further we could go and where we are going with equity and with helping women in their pursuit of reducing inequality. This week is also SDG Week Canada, Sustainable Development Goals Week, which is a national collaboration with institutions, universities, and colleges across the country to promote the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And SDG 5 is to SDG 5 is gender equality, and SDG 10 is reducing inequality. Specifically, I think of target 10.2 to empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all. And in this regard, we have three of our presenters, the women from the University of Tasmania, who are part of the Inspiring Women in STEM Fellowship Program started in 2018 by Dr. Emily Flies to lift and profile some of the incredible young women doing PhDs in STEM at the University of Tasmania. So the program provides funds to the fellows to create a STEM engagement program with youth in the community and to also support them in the presentation and community engagement opportunities and hoping that their mentorship will amplify their voice to inspire current and future generations of women in STEM. And so when we thought about this and Emily and I chatted about it, we thought, hey, wouldn't it be great to bring this voice across borders? The SDGs are global goals. They are for the betterment of the entire planet, for planet prosperity, and peace and partnership. So how do we bring this to a broader community? So we've partnered with them. Thanks to Dr. Maureen Reid at the University of Saskatchewan, we were able to invite 2 University of Saskatchewan students to join this conversation. And these 5 women have actually networked and been working together over the past month to prepare the presentations you're about to see. So some great collaborative learning for them as well through this. So thank you to the women. We'll get right to their presentations. We'll have Vimarsha, then Mona, Michaela, Marley, and Danielle present to us, followed by a panel moderated by Emily, and then Q&A from the audience. I will bring your attention to the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So please put questions in that Q&A box and not in the chat, so that way we can see the questions and respond to them in a timely manner. So with that, I will pass the screen to Vimarsha.
Thank you. Thank you, Aditi. And let me share my screen with you. Hope you all can see them, right? Yep.
Yes, looks good.
Okay. So, good evening and good morning to all of you. Sorry that we are in past and future. So, as you all aware by now, the topic is STEM and Sustainable Development Goals. So before I move to that, I would like to walk you through my STEM journey. So I'm from Sri Lanka and my hometown is Colombo. I was born and bred there until I decided to move to Australia. So my STEM journey there is my hometown, that tiny little spot, if you can see that, it's Colombo. And my STEM journey, it is not a very straightforward one. I started choosing biology, chemistry, and physics as my university entrance examination subjects, and then studied Ayurvedic medicine and surgery. That is a traditional medical system in Sri Lanka, and had a bit of deviation into psychology and health management in the middle, and finally ended up in medical research. I had doubts about what to choose and where to go, but finally managed to find my passion, which I think is very important to all of us. Now, I would like to share a bit on my research with you. So let's have a look on the screen. So if I ask you how old these kids are, you will definitely have a nearly correct guess. So what if I tell you that their blood vessels are older than their age? Confusing, right? Okay, let me explain a bit further. So if we take those two boys on the screen, let's just name them Jack and Jim, and assume that they're at the same age of 7, and they live in exact conditions, they live in the same family. But they do have different preferences on food and their leisure time activities. So let's say Jack likes veggies, but Jill doesn't really want to eat them. And he wants burgers and chips on regular basis. Of course, we all want them occasionally. And Jack prefers to go out and play with friends after school, but Jill really enjoys watching cartoons, which happens sometimes. So even though they're at the same age, and they look exactly same for as the other kids on their age, their blood vessels might age different because they do have different lifestyle preferences. So let me tell you why blood vessels are so important, because they consider as the river network of our body, and they provide nutrients to our organs and remove waste product, which is really helpful for their function. So our internal organs old as we get old, which is really normal, and this is exactly same for your blood vessels. But if they alter faster than our age, then that's going to cause a lot of trouble, as our blood pressure can go up, and then that's going to damage our brain, heart, and kidneys. So as in our story, our food preferences or physical activity we engage in, or many other factors out there, can accelerate these normal changes in the blood vessels. So in my research project, I'm observing the factors that can accelerate this aging process of the blood vessels, especially amongst children. So these factors, as I told you, can be anything out there: socioeconomic factors or genetic factors, as food and exercise. So to identify these factors, I'm using a collaborative international database called Youth Vascular Consortium, which has diverse aging data. And the purpose of my research is to provide a chance to initiate early preventative and management interventions so that we can prevent the occurrence of heart diseases when children get older or in their adult age, and to reduce the organ damage, and finally to reduce premature occurrence of death. So as researchers, in initial age stage, we are planning the impact of our research. So I think that Sustainable Development Goals provide a great platform in planning our research impact. So I would like to align my research project with SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. So this goal is established to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. So it has 13 targets, and I would like to align my research project with one target that is there to reduce 1/3 of premature mortality from non-communicable diseases through prevention and treatment by 2013. So my research project aimed to reduce deaths that occur from heart disease by using early detection and management. So I just shared my research with you. As researchers, we always aim to share our research with many parties other than our own research team. So these external parties may include other research teams, policymakers, practitioners, and most importantly, public out there. So why do we really need to share this? I believe sharing has mutual benefits for both the parties, as researchers for us and as public for everybody out there. So the main benefit is raising awareness. We are aiming to make public aware on health problems and preventative measures, and also practitioners on new effective treatments, which is also very important. And by sharing, we are planning to empower public so they can have a choice in a healthier behavior or choose whatever they want with the knowledge that sharing research provided them with. So this may be very effective if we aim to share our research with school kids or youth, because choosing a healthy behavior over an unhealthy behavior can be more advantageous to them as they grow. Improving public engagement in research is also beneficial for both parties in knowledge-wise and also to improve the research. And also influencing policy and services is a long-term advantage of sharing research. Finally, it is a great opportunity for network. For the researcher, they can identify the problem that lies there among the public, and this will also provide future directions of our research. So we are talking on STEM. So why inclusion in STEM is so important to me? I think that this is my chance to make a positive and sustainable impact on the community. In my research, I'm focusing on making young generation healthier, so there will be socio-economic as well as health benefits in the long term. I value the opportunity to work in STEM fields, and I'm also working to improve the chance for the future generation to work on the STEM too. So with Inspiring Women in STEM grant, I'm planning to address few issues that I identified as affecting women's presence in STEM. They are cultural lack of resource and finance and lack of awareness. So I would like to align my Inspiring Women in STEM project with these important two SDG goals, which are quality education and reduce inequalities. So I selected a school on the border of Western Province that has more than 65% of female students. All of them come from underprivileged families, and they do not have laboratories or science equipments. So I will provide them with the hands-on models that facilitate their science education and help them to understand concepts in science. I'm also planning to conduct an awareness program on the future opportunities in STEM. So as a woman in STEM, I admire the diversity in STEM and the sustainable development it brings to the community. I'm continuing to support the future generation to do the same. Thank you for listening.
Great work, Vimarsha. Thank you. And we'll pass it now to Mona.
Let me stop sharing.
And a reminder to folks, as Mona's getting set up, that you can put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to those after the 5 presentations and the panel discussion. All right, thanks, Mona.
No worries. So hello, everybody. Good afternoon and good evening, and thank you for organizing such an event. My name is Mona. I'm a PhD candidate in chemistry at University of Tasmania, and I'm so glad that I'm here to share my story as a woman with you. And I think that when women's lives are safe, productive, and fulfilled, everyone benefits. This is my country, Iran, which is almost 14K kilometers away from Hobart. Did you also know that Iran is a girl's name and means the motherland? Here are two pictures of site visitings of my country. The first one is a Persepolis in the south of Iran, and the second one is one of the most famous museums and gardens in Tehran. My hometown is Tehran, the capital, which I grew up and I lived until I moved out. It is a mega city with rich history full of museums, parks, shopping centers, restaurants, and gardens. So this is a picture of me and my brother at the age of 5. And from my childhood, I was very curious about the environment. I've been interested in science subject since my parents provided us with scientific books for kids. For example, I remember a couple of different scientific books, such as Isaac Asimov books for kids. And I always was surprised by the influence of the science and impact of science around us. So the initial interests for my passion into chemistry started when I got used to watch an animated television series for children named Professor Balthazar, an old genius chemist who was able to find a solution for his surrounding problems by mixing compounds and making new things in his magical machine. So this surprised me, exploring the world of chemistry. So I just started to making my first experiments, making soap bubbles at the age of 5. I also remember that I was surprised by dissolving sugar in a cup of tea, making a sweet drink for breakfast. So chemistry has diversity and was been my lifelong passion since I've obviously seen the significance of chemistry in everyday life, from pharmaceutical industries making new medicine, vitamins, to fuels in our vehicles, batteries in watches and cell phones, detergent as cleaners, fabrics in synthetic dresses, and cosmetics and beauties. So because of these huge diversities, I always wanted to learn more about chemistry. And I felt the direct impact of chemistry in my life. So it encouraged me to know the world around myself by seeking the answer how and why. How this happened and why this happened. So understanding the behavior of molecules, their reactions, and creating solutions for problems to have a better quality of life. I really enjoyed doing experiments in high school when we were learning about chemistry. And I also got used to help my classmates and friends in solving chemistry problems and questions. So I just continued my education in chemistry, and I got excellent score in chemistry at high school. So I had this chance to enter the university in one of the best public university in capital. And I was very interested in the world of metals in chemistry varieties. This is a picture of me for bachelor degrees graduation. And this is a picture of me and my siblings and friends for master degrees graduation. So after that, I started working. So there are many options to work as a chemist. So I chose working in energy industry and field. I started working in a company as a gas refinery providing natural fuels for our vehicles in the south part of Iran. And I worked as a quality control chemist in that laboratory for a couple of years. So working in that laboratory provided me many experience, and I felt from near the challenges and opportunities working in a laboratory. And I tried to work on a project and contribute in a project to save the planet and reduce the amount of greenhouses. So we all know that the negative effects of hazardous gases on the environment, which is a global challenge, and finding ways to capture those gases, for example, carbon dioxide and other gases, results in less air and environment pollutions. So this is in alignment with SDGs goal number 7 to provide clean energies for environments. After workings, I moved out to Australia and I started my education as a PhD in chemistry. I also was aware of the decreasing the pollution in the environment because of my work background and previous experience. So one of the reasons for continuing my education was how to reduce the waste gases and keep planet safe. I worked experimentally and using computer for some theoretical calculations to find compounds and make compounds which can help us to reduce the amount of waste gases in the planet. I also think that impact of openly sharing of research and education is raising awareness of everybody. And also by sharing knowledge, we can improve our networking, and we can share our research with colleagues and people who can help us in the way of research. So I think that it is important to involve STEM women in chemistry, because still in my country are some challenges like cultural expectations for girls that they in rural specifically areas might not interested to get higher degrees in educations, and there are some social limitations in finding an appropriate job. Based on my personal experience, that I had some challenges as work that sometimes women cannot get the higher paid jobs, and they cannot reach to their dreams because of the environments, and they need to keep working and keep learning as much as they can to just following their dreams. So by using following and involving more girls and women in STEM projects, I hopefully hope to help girls, young girls and women to boost their self-confidence and their aspirations to study scientific and chemistry in higher degrees. So I just had this chance to visit my hometown after a couple of years. This is the picture of my high school that I visited after more than 10 years. So I think it would be a good idea to facilitate chemistry experiments by purchasing equipment and scientific books for young girls in high schools to motivate and encourage them learn chemistry through experimentations. And I also presented my PhD journey to see the significance of chemistry, specifically in modern life, in our daily life, and to boost women's and girls' inspiration to involve in more STEM fields and answer the questions, what happens with using chemistry and how it happens and why this happens. And just do not forget that not every chemist looks like the Professor Balthazar. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mona. That was a great ending. But what representation looks like. And now you've been that for those women. Thank you. Michaela, we'll go to you next. We're going to come back to Saskatchewan and then head back to Tasmania.
Should be able to see my screen now, and I will blow up my presentation. There we go. So, hello everyone, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Michaela Sadlowski, and I'm a PhD candidate in the School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Saskatchewan, which is located, as AEDT told us, on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis people. Today, I've been asked to speak about a few things, including the impact of working and sharing knowledge with people in groups outside of academia, how my work aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals, and why inclusion in STEM fields matters. I'm going to use my doctoral research project as an example to illustrate my thoughts on each of these points. So first, I will start with a brief introduction to that project, which is called Empowering Resource-Based Communities to Adapt to Climate Change. So the purpose of my research is to work closely with a resource-based community to co-develop a step-by-step process for conducting community climate change vulnerability assessments and developing climate adaptation plans. The community I'm working with is called Doig River First Nation, and it's located in Treaty 8 territory on the traditional lands of the Dun-Niza people in what is now known as Northern British Columbia, Canada. So Doig River is an Indigenous community, and as such, they have experienced oppression through historic and ongoing forms of colonization. As you can see in these photos, they have also been dealing with the impacts of climate change already in very real ways. This year alone, they've dealt with flooding, which is pictured on the top left corner. They had to reinforce their riverbank in order to protect an important cultural building in the community. They've also dealt with a severe drought, pictured on the bottom, and heavy smoke, which reduced their quality for several weeks, pictured on the right-hand side. They've also been identifying many changes in seasonal patterns over time, which they've been reporting and discussing with me throughout the course of the project. So more specifically, what we're doing with this project is finding a way for the community to assess how climate change is affecting them and will affect them in the future, and then to determine appropriate ways that they can respond to these changes in order to maximize their well-being and protect the health and safety of their members. We're approaching the project from a feminist research paradigm, which focuses on the importance of social dimensions, including gender, race, socioeconomic status, among many other things, in determining how people experience and move through the world. As you may know, a lot of scientific research on almost all topics is done by white men and about white men. And so part of the focus of this project is to find ways to not only open the doors for people with marginalized identities, but to be very purposeful in listening to and amplifying their voices. For example, in our project, one thing we learned is that hosting meetings and workshops with smaller groups or one-on-one allowed us to hear from women within the community, since the large community meetings tended to be dominated by elder men. Instead of these large group workshops, then we offered drop-in workshops. We made maps together where community members could pop in and out as they liked, and this allowed us to ensure that all the participants were able to have their say in a more equitable manner. So finding inclusive and just ways to adapt to climate change in communities matters, And finding mechanisms for building social and environmental justice into our adaptation planning processes is a key part of what we're trying to do throughout this project. I believe that I could make a case for why my research project is relevant to nearly every one of the Sustainable Development Goals, but I've been asked to connect it to only one or two. So an obvious first choice was goal number 13, climate action. This one is central to the purpose of my research, and I think this is also a good opportunity to emphasize the importance of adaptation as climate action. So I think often when we think about climate action, we default to mitigation strategies, meaning ways that we can lower our carbon and GHG emissions and slow or stop the process of climate change. Adaptation, on the other hand, means adjusting or adapting our behaviors to be more prepared for changes that are already happening or expected to happen in the future. And adaptation is a really key and integral part of responding to climate change because, as we've seen, we're already experiencing these impacts. The second SDG that resonates with my research is goal number 10, reduce inequalities. This goal essentially summarizes what we're trying to accomplish through the adaptation planning process that we've created. So responding to change demands that communities change. And I think that if we see these change as opportunities to identify and address inequalities by empowering marginalized voices, we're better off in the end. And on the topic of reducing inequalities, I'd like to just reflect for a moment on why it is so important to me to make and hold space for women in STEM fields. So today, feminist thought is concerned with more than just gender inequality. We've come to recognize that inequities are complex and layered, and that systems of oppression that create these inequities are deeply intertwined with one another. The key thing about doing research like mine with communities and not just about or for them is the opportunity to hear from and empower voices that are often marginalized, like those of women and Indigenous peoples in my case. Current feminist research paradigms suggest that these groups tend to have more knowledge than members of dominant social groups because they're able to understand multiple perspectives and worldviews simultaneously, those of the dominant group as well as their own. The reason it's so important to uplift and empower women in STEM is the same reason it is so important to center marginalized voices in community research projects. By ensuring that women are presented in spaces that tend to be dominated by men, we can ensure that women's voices are heard and their perspectives included in everything that we do, not just because it's the democratic or the right thing to do, but also because the knowledge we produce is then twice as strong and twice as accurate when it doesn't ignore half of the world's population. In fact, I'd like to advocate that supporting women in STEM and in life goes beyond simply recognizing their value and their achievements. It requires us to be aware of and critical of the multiple systems of oppression that exist to create gender inequity and other types of inequity in the first place, like patriarchy, white supremacy, imperialism, capitalism, and heteronormativity, to name just a few. On International Women's Day and every day, we should celebrate and uplift women, but we should also take time to think very carefully about how we fit into these systems, how we benefit from them, and how we can adapt our behaviors to help dismantle them. I'd like to end with a quote that illustrates this concept nicely. It was written by Audre Lorde, a Black lesbian feminist poet. She writes, "I cannot afford the luxury of fighting one form of oppression only. I cannot afford to believe that freedom from intolerance is the right of only one particular group." And on that note, I will pass the floor over to Marley. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Michaela. And Marley, will pass it on to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, let me figure out share.
Michaela, you may need to unshare your screen.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to get back to my Zoom screen. Marley, is it possible for you to start yours and kick mine off?
I'll try. Hang on.
Sorry.
Stop you sharing. Yeah, hang on.
There, I stopped you.
Oh, I found it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. Sweet.
Solidarity and collaboration.
Totally.
Thanks, Marley.
Thanks, guys. I'll just sort out the side here. Bear with me. Thanks so much for having me today. I really appreciate being here. I'm from the University of Tasmania, as it's been mentioned, and I am here to talk to you about International Women's Day, STEM and the SDGs, as we've all sort of mentioned. I work at the Wicking Centre in Hobart at the University of Tasmania, doing some dementia and older adult research, so which I will get into shortly. So let's start, if that will work. So what are diverse learning audiences? And I think this is an important question to start with. I think that we might just assume that a diverse learning environment is one just different to our own, forgetting that the one that we are in is also different, diverse and unique. There are, of course, many factors that make us different from one another. Some things may be enduring or can be as temporary as personal mood or time of day at which we are presenting. Taking these things into account can make research more or less impactful and accessible. And of course, the list goes on there. For example, imagine you are sharing your research at an assembly at a school located in rural Tasmania, about 2 hours away from the capital city and almost 90 kilometres away from the nearest traffic light. This area has a low socioeconomic demographic, low levels of parental educational attainment, but students from a variety of backgrounds, small classrooms that can facilitate one-on-one learning, large outdoor spaces, and students with a keen interest in science. Now, in many ways, this learning environment can be challenging to a teacher, to an audience, or to a researcher. However, sharing research into this environment with people who may have less opportunity to hear research compared to those sitting in a lecture theatre is so important. And I can certainly attest to this, as this is where I lived for the vast majority of my life, and where I went to school at on a place called the Tasman Peninsula. Well, how is this impactful? Well, ensuring that everyone has equal access to information, and that little girls like me are given the same opportunities to learn as anyone else, and that no one misses out. Now, unfortunately, where I grew up, university, where we all know the majority of research is conducted, is not a pathway that is reinforced. Neither of my parents went to university. I wasn't even sure how to do that. And so when I got to university, I often felt alone, outside of ivory towers and stuck under a glass ceiling. And what I know is that if there was someone there to show me the way, finding this pathway for myself would have been nowhere near as scary. And learning and sharing research into this environment doesn't have to be any more or less difficult than me sharing into this environment now. Just different and just diverse. And I think the fear of the unknown prevents research being shared openly. For me and my research, that means neuroscience, and that is the relationship between people and their behavior and their brain activity. And what that shows us, I think, can be very telling. However, how I speak about neuroscience into particular learning audiences may be very different. With experts in the field, I could use more assumed language when speaking about the brain and specific regions. For instance, the region M1 is located in Brodmann's area 4 at the dorsal segment of the frontal lobe. Yeah, a lot of confusing terminology in the brain, which has taken me 4 years at uni and a third of the way through a PhD to begin to understand. And in other situations where I might be less sure there are specific experts in the audience, I would define things. In the human brain, the primary motor cortex, also known as M1, is important for planning and executing movement. When speaking to students still at school, I might say something like, there are many areas in the brain that are switched on when we ride a bike or run in a race, or perhaps then present an activity in which they have to engage these areas. What I'm saying is that words are intentional, and what I know about my audience is my advantage, which then allows who I'm teaching and what I'm saying to get the most out of it. And I think that this is impactful. So neuroscience, well, what does that look like in research? Well, in regard to my own PhD research, I think it best aligns with Goal 3 of the UN SDGs. Now, when I look at people's brain activity when completing tasks that require them to make movements. So these movements are things like pressing the keys on a keyboard with their fingers, or even taking quick steps, kind of like in those Dance Revolution, like arcade games, but absolutely nowhere near as fun, in response to what they see on a computer screen. And what my research specifically looks at is whether or not on tasks like these ones, people living with dementia or older adults have greater difficulty completing these tasks and show different patterns of brain activity than younger adults. And that subtle changes on performances in these tasks may reflect greater difficulty for older adults and people with dementia to complete more complex physical tasks, which may or may not contribute to their risk of falling. And what I hope to do is promote good health and well-being in older populations by aiming to use these tasks and people's brain activity to monitor, manage, and detect dementia earlier, and hopefully prevent serious falls in older adults. Now, I really enjoy sharing the research I'm doing, and I think there are two key points for impactful sharing of research into diverse environments and to diverse audiences. First, I think using diversity to your advantage, knowing your audience and who you are speaking to. A lot of times when sharing research or science communication, audience may feel like research is spoken to them rather than taught and alongside them. Especially in communities in which research or university are not something that is really seen or regularly experienced. I think inspiring others with what you say only encourages greater engagement, which I think is always a positive. But you need to understand that your life and experiences will and can vary from others, and therefore how you share your research will reflect this. And I think this leads into the second point of being intentional with what you're saying and how you are saying it. I think anyone can relate to this if you've ever tried to explain your research to your parents. Recognizing how you communicate your research is different depending on your audience. And I think failing to do these things is where who you are teaching misses out on hearing about research that may spark their interest in STEM. Now, what I hope to do with the Inspiring Women in STEM Fellowship aligns with Goal 5 of the SDGs, a goal with values very close to me, and highlights the importance of teaching into these diverse environments that I've been speaking about. And with the grant, I intend to travel to rural schools around Tasmania, and I think these schools are simply underfunded and overlooked. And students in these areas already have less opportunities purely based on their geographical location. And I think that is simply not fair, especially when the spark for science lives in these schools, but it just might not have been found yet. And at these schools, I intend to present neuroscience workshops to engage interest in the area. Psychology and neuroscience aren't subjects really touched upon until students reach year 11 and 12. And as we know, a lot of students in rural schools don't ever get to make it this far into their education. And for girls, these areas might not even mean something they thought of as a potential career path for them. And during these workshops, I will also be presenting a bit of a how-to on transitioning to higher education coming from a small rural school, and that you can be a woman in science. And while I don't have everything figured out or have the cheat codes or anything, I hope to use my knowledge to help them get the skills simply needed to enroll in units, catch the right bus, or apply for certain scholarships. So wherever a student might be on their journey into STEM or university, I hope to show them that it's really not as scary as it seems. And through these things, I hope to be a good role model for both students from rural schools and young girls interested in science. Because if I can inspire even one person to follow a similar pathway to me, that will be a win. So why does inclusion in STEM matter? Well, big question. To me, it matters because it allows me, for example, to present posters or presentations of my research and be a total nerd about it, unapologetically. Inclusion provided to me by my school allowed me to apply for a program to go caving in high school because for one time I thought about being an environmental scientist. It matters because in Australia, kids from rural schools like the one I grew up in are 1.5 years behind in science compared to kids in the city. And then just last year, women in Australia make up 36% of enrollments in university STEM courses. Inclusion in STEM matters for me and so many other girls and women. So now when we are all grown up, we can be impactful with our research and pave the way for others. Now, this is one of my favorite photos ever. Margaret Hamilton, a NASA computer scientist, standing next to some pretty important code. that she wrote by hand that put humanity on the moon. And I love this quote as well, no choice but to be pioneers. And I think this is as true today as it was in 1969, that by pioneering being a woman in science, openly sharing our research and showing others that they can too, the impact can be enduring for generations. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for being involved in this. And you can contact me here if you'd like.
Thank you, Marley. It's always nice to have those inspirational leaders who've guided the way for us. And we will round out the presentation section with Danielle from the University of Saskatchewan.
Thank you very much. Share my screen here. Look okay? Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here and joining our event today. My name is Danielle Spence. I am a PhD candidate with the School of Environment and Sustainability and the Global Institute for Water Security at the University of Saskatchewan. I'd also like to thank all the presenters before me for sharing their stories. I feel incredibly inspired. So I'll share a little bit about my story. Starting with my PhD research. My research focuses on water quality in lakes, specifically the formation and management of harmful algal blooms. So if you want to talk about green scummy lakes, I'm your gal. I could talk your ear off about it, which maybe isn't so interesting to some people, but it is to me. So a little bit of background on me. I grew up in a lake town called Sylvan Lake in the province of Alberta here in Canada. Partially related to the fact that I grew up at a lake, I spent pretty much all my time in summers swimming, doing any sort of outdoor activities such as camping or fishing. For anyone who's been to Canada or lives here, you know that you got to take advantage of the summers because they are short. And so because of all this time I spent outdoors, I developed a really deep appreciation for nature and especially for water. I always knew I wanted to be a scientist. I didn't always know what kind I wanted to be. I floated between many different ideas of what kind. But ultimately, because of my deep appreciation for nature, I decided to do an education in environment and sustainability. So I did my bachelor's degree and my master's degree in environmental science, and I am now doing my PhD in environment and sustainability. Throughout my education, I've been really drawn to this idea of making an impact on sustainability. And in my PhD specifically, I have the goal of making an impact on sustainably managing freshwater ecosystems. My PhD research aligns with SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation, specifically target 6.6, which is to protect and restore water-related ecosystems, in my case, lakes, and also target 6B, which is to support local engagement and water management. So what I've come to realize in my PhD and what many people have come to realize is that although research has historically been done independently of people who are, for example, affected by water quality issues, by doing research with these people who have been impacted by water quality issues, it can lead to more relevant and useful research outcomes. So I worked to integrate that in my PhD research. One example is my one study site, which is in Elk Beaver Lake. It's on Vancouver Island, which is just south of the city of Vancouver in the province of British Columbia in Canada. This lake experiences harmful algal blooms in the winter and the summer. And as you can see in the picture on the would be my right, there's a public health advisory posted at one of the beaches at this lake. And this is warning people about the risks of using the lake during periods of harmful algal blooms because of the risks to human and animal health. Throughout this research, I've worked with local community members and the regional government to better understand how these harmful algal blooms occur, how they have worsened over time in this lake, and how they have impacted the community. This research will be shared back to the community through a report, which will be written in accessible language, through a series of presentations, and by sharing my data and the code that I use to run statistical analyses on this data. So You've heard from the presentations before, there are numerous benefits of openly sharing research and involving people in the research process. And I also hope that my research is able to help inform decision-making surrounding this lake, specifically what the community priorities are in terms of repairing this lake or restoring it, and how much they would be willing to pay to repair this lake. So reflecting on this question of why inclusion in STEM matters to me, at first I thought, you know, it's very clear to me because it is the means of achieving my goals. As I had mentioned earlier, I've always wanted to be a scientist. So here I am in my PhD, I'm doing science. I am contributing or working towards contributing to the sustainable management of lakes. And I've been able to involve those who are affected by water quality issues in the research process. So that's been really fulfilling for me. But reflecting deeper on this question, I realized that similar to some of the presenters before, my path hasn't always been very straightforward or particularly easy. But I have been incredibly fortunate to have some strong, incredibly brilliant women as mentors who have guided me on this journey and really nurtured my growth. They have shared opportunities. They've helped me to really strategize what is the best way to achieve my career goals. They have encouraged me to take different opportunities that help me to achieve those goals. And then they have supported my pursuit of those opportunities, for example, by writing reference letters for my different applications for scholarships and different programs that help me to develop professionally and academically. So reflecting on this question, I realized that my own inclusion in STEM matters to me because it is a means of achieving my goal, but also the inclusion of the women who are my mentors and the women who were their mentors, because they have really made my path to being included in STEM much less challenging for me. So it's my hope that when I get to the stage where I'm able to mentor young women in STEM, that I'm able to follow in my mentors' footsteps in terms of being able to make their journey to inclusion in STEM at least a little less challenging. And I know that, there are so many challenges that remain to inclusion in STEM, but after hearing the presentations today, I'm really optimistic for the next generation of women in STEM. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Danielle. That was lovely and a nice way to round out our presentation with some thoughts on solidarity. So I'll pass it to Emily now. Emily will guide a conversation between all of our panelists. And folks, while you're listening to the panel, please do put some questions in the Q&A box and we'll get to those in about 15 minutes.
Thanks so much, Aditi, and thank you to all of our presenters today. It's really fantastic to hear your stories about your research and the incredible work that you're doing and have done and are doing. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Palawa Pakana people of Lutruwita, Tasmania, the land where I live and the land that I love. Especially in the context of International Women's Day, I'd like to recognize the impacts that colonization has had on our Indigenous community here in Tasmania, the impacts of genocide on that population, and especially the resilience of the women in that community and continuing to pass down their language, their culture, and their knowledge, especially their knowledge of the water ways. So women are the holders of knowledge for water in the Tasmanian Aboriginal community. So they hold the skills and knowledge of fishing and harvesting from the oceans and rivers, and that's such critical knowledge to be passing down. So speaking of challenges that people have faced, I'd like to hear from the presenters today what challenges you have encountered in your journey to becoming a woman in STEM, and in particular, what has helped motivate or sustain you in pursuing your journey, your STEM pathway, despite those challenges. So because Michaela's first up on my screen, I might see if Michaela wants to start.
Thank you for the question. I have spent a bit of time thinking about it, and I think that there would be many people in a better position to answer this question than me. I feel like I do have a woman, me being a woman is a marginalized identity that I have, but my whiteness and lots of other aspects of my identity just grant me so much privilege. And I have been privileged in so many ways throughout my life and throughout my academic journey. I have had big cheerleaders that have helped me through the trials and tribulations of studenthood and finding my way into graduate school, etc. So yeah, I think I'd like to pass it on to someone else to speak to challenges, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Michaela. And that's another really good point, is to think about and recognize the privileges and the supports that we have had along the way. Would someone else like to kick off talking about any challenges that they faced and what's helped motivate or sustain them on their journey? I'd like to avoid having to call names, but how about any of the inspiring the women in the Inspiring Women in STEM program? You've thought a little bit about some of the barriers that you've encountered, and so it'd be nice to hear about what challenges you faced and just what's kept you going.
Yeah, from my perspective and my personal experience, I had some experience in workplace. So I think that we couldn't see the same opportunities for women to access to higher roles in workplaces, particularly for senior roles and managers. So this was a challenge that I also had in mind, that maybe sometimes we need to keep up more to actually fulfill this gap between others. And the only thing that just let me keep moving and following my dreams was huge support of my family and my mentor during this journey.
Thanks. Thanks, Mona. Family can be such an incredible source of support. Does anyone else have any thoughts they want to share on a challenge they faced and something that's helped sustain them?
Yeah, sure. I'll go. Yeah, so as I mentioned in my presentation, I've come from a pretty rural area of Tasmania. So I had a geographical, I guess, challenge in that where I needed to go to university was quite a travel away. I had to move out when I was 16, 17 to go on and go to, we call it college, but it's grade 11 and 12 here in Tassie, and then go on and go to university. So I guess there was that, you know, and then surrounding that is the kind of stereotyping almost of like what you should be doing is just not going to university. It's easier just to stay in your area and just get a job and whatever. But I never felt that pressure at all from my parents. So I was really lucky in that regard. They couldn't care either way. They were happy for me to go on and do what I wanted to do, or they were happy to, you know, have a similar pathway to them or what have you. So, you know, I think a lot of my challenges were always counteracted with a nice amount of support from my family and friends and people around me and mentors, like everyone said. So, yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Marley. If anyone else wants to comment on, okay, go ahead, Vimarsha.
Sorry, I had a technical difficulty in unmuting. So I agree with Molly. I think it's just the support from your close circle, I would say, the family and your partner or siblings. I think that's really important. And in my case, I think that I had challenges on figuring out where I really need to go. I tried like many other pathways before I come into medical research, but then I realized that my passion lies in somewhere else. But I think that's also important, that you try out something and you figure out that you don't like it, or this is not your thing to do. And I think trying is also important.
Yeah, thank you, Vimarsha. It's a good point. And I think many of us have had really windy roads in getting to where we are. And it is sometimes tricky to figure out where our passion lies and what's a good fit for us. And I think one of the challenges in figuring out your passions and your pathway is sometimes self-doubt, is sometimes, that feeling of, I can't do this and I'm not fulfilling my potential in this space. Is that something that you guys have encountered? We talk a lot about imposter syndrome in science, especially for women. And I know it's something that I've experienced before and certainly had self-doubt along my own journey. But is that something that you guys have encountered, and what are your thoughts on overcoming those sorts of feelings?
I can maybe answer that a little bit from my own perspective. The imposter syndrome is real. I know it's talked a lot about when we begin our program with the School of Environment and Sustainability, that you probably will feel it at some point or another. And I was, I started my PhD with having very limited knowledge about harmful algal blooms and so my actual research focus. So I was like, I really don't know what I'm doing here. So I was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants and doing the best that I could. And I was very fortunate to have a really supportive research supervisor who was just like, you've got this, and just very encouraging and really nurturing my growth and, giving me different opportunities or encouraging me to apply for different things that help me to gain professional skills. So that has been really helpful. For example, right now I'm teaching a course, and throughout that I've been feeling huge imposter syndrome. I'm trying to teach third-year biology students about ecology. I'm not really an ecologist, so it happens. I think it's something that probably everybody in grad school experiences, the imposter syndrome. But I think just talking to people about it and kind of seeing their perspective, because sometimes we are our own worst enemies, and then we have these outside perspectives that is no, you're doing great, look at how far you've come. So I think that's important, having good supports that you can talk to about it.
Thanks, Danielle. I think that the challenge of teaching is something that can really increase the imposter syndrome, but it can sometimes also decrease it, I think, because if you get in the right mindset of teaching, that you're learning alongside people and that you're not the bearer of knowledge, you're helping each other on the journey, I think it really can help mitigate that. But it's kind of hard to get into that mindset when you have to develop lectures and be up at the head of the class. So yeah, I hear you on that challenge. Anyone else want to share any thoughts on imposter syndrome or self-doubt?
If nobody's going, I will. So I had it I don't know, I managed to reduce it by 10% by now, I think, but I still have a lot of
It's a very quantitative approach to understanding your imposter syndrome.
Of course, I think all of us have doubts when we really begin to go through our journeys. So after I began my PhD, I did have really great support from my supervisory team. They just helped me to manage my imposter syndrome. And then I also had a lot of support. I think Mali would also agree that we had head start development workshops from the university, which helps us to manage and to understand that. And they also try to normalize it, which is very comfortable. I think you don't feel like you're this alien in the middle of normal crowd thing. So it's normal for everybody. I think that also helped in my case.
Yeah, that's nice to know there are those good supportive programs at UTAS. Michaela?
Yeah, I really like everyone's comments. I'm feeling better, and I'm not the only one who struggles with this on a daily basis. But looking around our panel, I noticed we all are young, or at least look young. I don't know everyone's age, but I've found that, and I've noticed this throughout my life, that looking young, I think, kind of compounds that in certain ways. And I think I've internalized that a lot, so that I'm always just so aware of my newness to everything. And I almost feel like I have to like qualify that right away. Like, it's my first time I'm learning here. Like, and so I think, I don't know, it's just an interesting dynamic, I guess, that probably I'm hoping will eventually subside, or at least that like I'll look like I know what I'm doing, even if I don't feel like that. Yeah, but I think it also kind of puts us in a really good position of being able to learn. And I guess maybe turning that into an opportunity. Like, I'm always aware that I'm new to something and aware of the things that I don't know. And I think that puts me in a good position to say, okay, well then maybe here's what I can focus on next to build my knowledge and build my skills. So yeah.
It's very generous of you to say we're all looking very young, Michaela. I started going gray in like my mid to late 20s, and there are benefits for that, to not look young all the time. So that's that's a silver lining there. I want to say thank you to Mariana and Maureen for kicking off the Q&A questions. If anyone else has any thoughts, please do put those in there. We'll be getting to those in just a moment. But coming back to our panel, so that method of sort of saying, it's my first time, I'm just learning, that you mentioned, Michaela, I think helps, moderate both other people's expectations of us and also our expectations of ourselves. And, and I think it's nice if we can moderate our own expectations of ourselves internally that way. And, but that external challenge of knowing what the societal and cultural expectations of us, that one's a little bit harder. I'm curious about that part for the panel. So you all mentioned, well, several of you mentioned that you've had really supportive families and encouraging you on your pathway, which is nice, because sometimes, family has such an influence, and sometimes, they might not be supportive of a pathway in STEM. So I'm wondering what your feelings have been, or what you've viewed or experienced in your life as far as the societal and cultural and family expectations, whether positive or negative, or supportive or sort of resistance, either support or resistance that you felt, either from family or from, your broader culture and society in choosing a pathway in STEM and being a woman in STEM. Any thoughts on that? I know we do have people from different cultures. So we've got folks from Canada, from Iran, from Sri Lanka, and from Tasmania. So we might have some different views on societal and cultural expectations. Who would like to start with thoughts on that one?
Right. So I'm from Sri Lanka. People there are having like many conservative thoughts, I would say. They do have this expectations on that. It's not that girls don't have a chance to study, they do, but then after education, they are expected to start a family, get married, and have kids. And it's not very supportive on going up in your career or continuing into your passion, sort of thing. But going against that expectation is really hard. Like, you're getting a lot of waves from other people, and you're being questioned on why you're doing this, why you're not doing this. I think that in my case, I moved to Australia soon after my marriage, so I just got a little relief over there. But my parents were really supportive. They don't have my father has a bachelor's degree, but my mother was just not. But they were really supportive throughout achieving my dreams and supporting me and pushing me forward. And also my husband, I would say, he doesn't want me to stay home or like being a housewife or Anything that I don't want to do, he'd never push me to do so. I think that's also very important. Coming from a very conservative culture, I think your family and partner support is really important.
Thanks, Vimarsha. Yeah. What have other people experienced as far as their interpretation of cultural or societal expectations of them, and how has that impacted your choices?
Yeah, it's obviously going to be completely different for all of us. I think for me, coming through university, my bachelor's was in psychology, and I often felt sometimes when I was going through my degree that I was in a way pushed towards doing the counseling side of psychology and doing the caring sort of role, rather than doing what I really wanted to do, which is all the brain stuff. And I really, I loved that whole side of psychology much more than I enjoyed counseling. But I felt like I had to internally say to myself, like, no, you're going to be a psychologist. Like, that's what you're going to do. Like, that's why you're doing this degree. And then I got to the end of honors and I was like, I don't want to do that. So I think that there was pressure, but I think that might have been more so a societal pressure in my own head, not anything that was from my family or anything like that. It was it is something I had internalized. Okay, go for the caring profession, but yeah, something I had to get over, I guess. But yeah, like same as Vimarsha and everyone's been saying, it, super lucky to have a supportive family, even though my mum works in the local supermarket and my dad's a tiler, so no experience of university at all, and they have been super supportive of me to do what I wanted to do, so super lucky. But yeah,
I want to ask a follow-up question. The next question will be about those other people that have been champions in your life, teachers and other folks that have supported you. But yeah, would like to hear from anyone else about those cultural or societal expectations and how that's influenced your path. So Mona, go ahead.
Yeah, I also want to mention, so I was very lucky that I was in a supportive family and in scientific environment. But yeah, there were some social expectations and sometimes a circle of achievements. So just being in a competitive cycles of being successful and reaching goals as soon as possible. So I had this chance that my family didn't push me and always just encouraged me to just push away traditional thinking and do whatever you like. Even you like to explore the world or just, experience the life and education somewhere else, we support you. But yeah, it was something social, expectations, which is still exists. But I think every year and every decades by new generations, it becomes moderated and it becomes better. But from my experience, yeah, I always had to just overcome those social expectations to be, perfect, to reach your goals as soon as possible, but I didn't like to, and sometimes I couldn't keep up. Yeah, I just wanted to find my pathway and going through that step by step, because I think it's a journey and there is no end.
Yeah. And sometimes, those cultural expectations, as we understand them and as we interpret them in our lives, may not have to do with STEM specifically or our gender specifically. I feel like Mona, and from our conversations and what we've talked about in your journey, you certainly were very driven, to excel and, to achieve excellence. You and your brother, I think too. So, sometimes there's just that broader expectation of, do your best. I don't know if Danielle or Michaela have any thoughts on what they were, what sort of expectations they felt in their life and how that influenced their journey.
I feel like I can relate to, much of what has been said before, the kind of internal push to be the best or work as hard as you can to, achieve your goals, and you don't really know what that benchmark is. Is it good enough, and what's what's really good? So I've definitely felt that like internal pressure to, I guess, to succeed. And like my parents have been really supportive of me like throughout my entire education. It's been really nice. I mean, like beyond my parents, like with some friends and grandparents and stuff, there's always that question of when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? When are you going to settle down? And I've always put my career first because that is my life and it's what makes me happy. So I feel like those other questions just become irrelevant at that point, because it's like, I don't need to answer those questions because I'm doing what makes me happy. So that's kind of how I've tried to approach it.
Yeah, it's so nice to be able to feel confident in what is best for you, and being able to find that and stick to it. I think it's really nice. And there are women that are that know what they want is to have a family and to settle down in their town and contribute to their community in that way. And I think that's great too. It's just knowing what is best for you, which sometimes can be hard to figure out. Well, we're going to try to wrap up the panel discussion at 10:20, so in just a couple minutes, so we can go over to the Q&A, either questions that people are putting into the Q&A chat area, or if anyone wants to put their video on and ask a live question, there's going to be that opportunity as well. So I did have two other questions, but I think I'll wrap them together. So one of them was just wanting to hear more about the other people in your life that have been encouraging for you, if there are teachers or people in your community, or who else has supported you in this journey. And then the final question I want to ask is what your key learning has been, or what advice you would give to young people who are choosing a career at the minute. So I'll leave those two questions open to the panel. And if you have anything you want to say about a mentor or a champion that you haven't been able to mention yet, please do. And then what advice you would pass on to young people thinking about careers at this time. Who would like to start us off?
I'd like to note that I'm so lucky to have had so many very, very important mentors in my life thus far. And one of them is here in the room. One of my co-supervisors, Dr. Maureen Reed. She's just been absolutely a godsend, or whatever you believe in send, in my program so far. And so that's my shout out.
Thanks, Michaela. And we'll stay with you maybe if you have any advice that you'd like to share with young people when they're thinking about careers.
Okay, I didn't think as hard about this one. I'm sure I have some. I think it's has something to do with something that everyone's touched on in some way so far. And it's about, I guess, finding the balance between what your people and your communities and your families might expect of you and your societies, and also finding ways to break through that when it's not serving you and when those norms or expectations should be changing. And I guess, finding productive ways to push through the various things that people expect of us as women and as all of the other things that we are in life. So, yeah.
Nice. That sounded really, really well thought out. So well done coming up with that on the spot. Let's just go through the line, if that's all right, then to Danielle and Mona and Marley and Vimarsha.
Sure. So for me, it's been like teachers and mentors throughout my education who have really guided me along this path. I can remember one biology teacher in high school who told me about a student he knew that was tagging turtles in Hawaii, and I was like, I want to do that. And then I ended up doing an environmental science degree and doing a major project related to turtles. So that was really foundational for me. And now that I'm in my PhD, it's really been my research supervisor, Dr. Helen Balch, who has been just like my ultimate champion, and also Dr. Maureen Reed, who manages, I think, to have an impact on every student that she, ever encounters, and just like really warm and encouraging, and just like really nurturing that growth. So yeah, those mentors have really sustained me on this path. I know I wouldn't be where I am today without them, because I would be just lost and confused, I feel like, without that guidance. But I would have found my way eventually, but it would have been a lot harder. So those mentors, and I think career advice is hard because I'm still trying to figure it out for myself. I like Vimarsha's advice, just like try things out and see what you're passionate about. I think that's a good strategy. Like, if you know what you're interested in, find a way to make a career out of that, I think. And, asking questions to people, finding somebody who works in that career or something similar, and asking them about their career path and what they wish that they would have known when they get to like more advanced level in their careers. I feel like that was insight that I wish that I had known when I started my grad school, because maybe my path would have been a little bit more different and would have made it a little bit easier for me. But yeah, I think pursue what makes you happy, and you just got to keep fighting for those opportunities and push through.
Thanks, Danielle. Mona?
Yep, my science teacher in high school, she encouraged us a lot. She was very supportive and had a great knowledge in chemistry. Hopefully I'm still in contact with her after a couple of years. And I remember that she just taught us how to think broader and deeper about scientific subjects, which actually was very helpful for finding the way in the science subjects. So I really appreciate her thoughts. And for your next question, I think that from my experience and perspective, maybe just keeping the balance between life and career would be a helpful way to just going through this way, and then be brave and ready for challenges, and thinking out of box can actually encourage you to get more about subjects that you are working on and finding new ways.
Thanks, Mona.
No worries.
What are your thoughts, Marley?
Yeah, definitely my pathway planner or career advisor in high school and in primary school. She was fantastic, Miss Little. She was also the art teacher and the cooking teacher, because in small schools they do a lot of things. And yeah, just organizing to go on taster days to certain schools, and writing down what units I wanted to do to sort of plan out what ATAR I needed, and that kind of thing. So helpful. And then into university, I've got two fantastic female supervisors and a male supervisor, Dr. Rebecca St. George, Dr. Jane Alty, and Dr. Mark Hinder, all fantastic supervisors that are super supportive of me and my story and growth. And yeah, I think the biggest advice is you don't have to lock into one specific thing. Sometimes you find it along the way, along your journey. I knew I had a general goal of what I wanted to do, but I think putting not so much pressure on yourself if that changes is, a really important thing to do and learn early on, because, you don't want to get to the end and go, I don't actually like what I'm doing here. So find your passion along the way. I think that's important.
Thanks, Marley. That's a really good point. Vimarsha?
Yeah. So me being here today, speaking is a collaborative project, I would say. I had a lot of wonderful teachers and mentors throughout my school, and not to mention that I had ones that are a bit discouraging as well, but there was a big positive impact from the positive ones. And I also want to thank my primary supervisor, Dr. Rachel Climie. She believed in me. That's why I'm here studying my PhD. And also my co-supervisors, Associate Professor Shona Gall and Dr. Manik Breslin. who are also very encouraging, go out there, do everything other than research. So they are really encouraging and supporting in every way they can, and they are really accessible, which also make me very confident on that. I know that I can go to them whenever I have a problem. Is also very encouraging. And for the younger generation, I would say, just try. If you feel like doing something, step out from your comfort zone and then try it. So you know whether you want to continue into it or you just need to try something else. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vimarsha. Aditi, would you like to do some of these questions? Yeah.
Sure. And we
Thank
had
you.
one comment from the aforementioned Dr. Maureen Reed to say she's impressed by all of your journeys, that you've come from all the places you've come from to do the work that you're doing now. So none of you had predetermined pathways and you worked hard to get where you are. You are reflective role models for your peers and the generation of scientists to come. So some feedback there from one of our leaders. She's the UNESCO chair, co-chair in Biocultural Diversity, Sustainability, Reconciliation, and Renewal at our institution. And we had one question, it was directed at Michaela. So Michaela, maybe you can take the first stab, and if others want to respond, it's a question addressing power dynamics. And so how does having women in research or other marginalized individuals in the power position in research support empowerment for the collaborators or other? Is power vertically transferable in those systems? So if you want to take a stab at that.
Yes, I'll try. It's a hard question, and it's one that I think about a lot. Empowerment is a word that I use throughout my research project, and it's in the title of my project. And I have read very valid research articles with very valid points about how empowerment kind of has some built-in problems with the term itself, because it does kind of assume that there is a hierarchy and someone higher up is able to kind of pull someone else up from the bottom or from below where they are. And I think we can kind of see why that might be a problematic way to frame the type of work that we're doing. I think on the other hand, we can kind of take all the positive parts that comprise that term and run with them and focus on them instead, including, putting marginalized people and marginalized voices at the center of our work, and in a meaningful way rather than in a tokenistic way. So whether that means finding creative ways to share authorship with the community members and the communities that we're doing our work with, or being like Marley taught us about, very conscientious in how we share our findings and share ownership of our data. I don't know, I'm coming up with ideas, but yeah, I'll let someone else kind of hop on that.
We're in the last few minutes here, so I think that you've given us a good place to end with thinking about sharing power and rethinking the systems that we live and work within. It's been such a pleasure to hear from everyone today and to be uplifted and inspired by your work. I'd invite folks who, if you can, to turn on your camera and give the women a round of applause and give some appreciation for what they've been contributing to both of our institutions. Thank you for everyone for your time today. It's been a pleasure to hear from you all.
Thank you.
And can I quickly add, thank you to everyone for showing up today and joining us on this session. Thank you to all of the panelists for preparing your presentations and for sharing your story with us. And also thank you to Aditi for helping to coordinate this event.
Right back at you.